Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Should I Read. Today I'll be doing the worst books that I read, or like the most disappointing books that I read in 2020. So just like my best books of 2020, I only have 9 books this time around. I feel like, I didn't love a lot of books that I read in 2020, but I guess I also didn't hate a lot of books that I read in 2020. A lot of them were just like, middle of the road. So I only have 9 books this time around. I really wanted to do 10, but couldn't really find any that was like, not good. So only 9 books, which is not too bad. But yeah, let's just get right into the first one. So the first disappointing read, worst book that I read, and honestly I was so disappointed because I had such high expectations. It was like on my 5-star predictions video. It was just one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and I read it and I was like, what did I even read? And that is Red Hood by Elena K. Arnold. This one I gave 1 star. So this book is a retelling of Red Riding Hood, and it follows a girl called Bizu who one day she ends up running through the woods for whatever reason, and she ends up stumbling upon a wolf who attacks her, and she defends herself and ends up killing this wolf, and later realizes that this wolf has turned into a naked boy. And at first she is just super confused, not really sure if she imagined the wolf, not really sure if this is the same boy, like what's going on here. And as each month passes, she finds out all these secrets about the moon, about the blood, as well as these boys, these wolves, etc. And it is just weird. I really did not like this book at all. So this isn't really a spoiler, but you find out from the start that this whole thing is a metaphor between boys and wolves, and how some boys are turned into wolves because they just don't get their way. They're one of those guys who think that they deserve everything, including females, and they will do anything to get that, and they don't take no for an answer. So that's kind of like the whole basis of the story, about how these boys turn into wolves because of their base nature. And I don't know, it was just really weird. I also thought it was super weird that the whole cycle thing follows like the menstrual cycle. And I liked how this book and how this author tackled a very delicate and usually a forbidden topic, but I just felt like it was just so bizarre to me. Like, what is it about the menstrual cycle? I don't know, it just seemed weird, and I just don't know if I really liked how it was represented in this book. I liked that the author included it, and I liked something different, and it's like a book that actually talks about this topic, but I just don't know if I really like the execution of how it was actually presented in this book. So overall, I feel like this book was just kind of off-putting. I really didn't care for it. I felt like I was reading it and it was just like a hazy dream. I didn't really care about the characters or the plot or anything really, and so overall I did not love this book at all. Like, I just had such high expectations going in, and it just did not live up to its hype at all. Then the next book that I was super disappointed by is Soul Swift by Megan Bannett. This one I gave 1 star. So the book basically follows a girl who is Gala, and she is a vessel who can somehow channel the voice of the one true God through song, and her religion believes that Elaf is actually the great demon, and they basically imprisoned her all these years ago. One day she ends up getting involved with a cover-up, and she ends up teaming up with a god called Tabak, who is an enemy soldier whose their religion is under the belief that Elaf is actually the great mother, and his mission right now is to free her and just release her. Somehow things happen, and Gala finds herself actually as now the vessel of Elaf, and now basically Elaf is possessing her, and so now the two of them must find a way to exorcise this demon or this mother from her body. So my biggest issue with this book is that the summary that I just mentioned is basically exactly what happened in this book. There were no unpredictabilities, no plot twists, nothing to it. It just felt so boring and so predictable, because literally this book just followed that path and that was it, like nothing else. And the ending was also just so disappointing. I absolutely hated it. Like, I don't know for other people, but for me personally, I really don't like open-ended endings. I like endings where they're very much like, this is what happens, and maybe an epilogue to show like what happens like 3 years later kind of thing. But I like clear-cut endings, and this ending was just, what the fuck. I feel like I was reading the Goodreads reviews afterward, and everyone was also complaining about the ending as well. So yeah, clearly I was not the only one who just really despised the ending. I just feel like the book has so much potential. Like, the whole concept of it just sounded so intriguing, but I felt like the execution was just very dry. So overall, didn't recommend it. Definitely won't read it again. I was just very disappointed overall. Next book that I was very disappointed by is The Princess Will Save You by Sarah Henning. This is another book that I gave 1 star to. This is marketed as a gender-bender version of The Princess Bride, and while there were some similarities, it's really not similar at all. So this basically follows a girl, her name is Princess Amarande, I think that's how I wrote out her name, and she's off to save the love of her life, a stable boy. So after her father passes away, she's given a choice to either marry into one of the other kingdoms around her or give up her throne. And to basically force her hand, her advisors and everything, someone ends up kidnapping her beloved, and now she is running off to save him. So like I said already, this book is considered or like marketed as gender bended version of The Princess Bride, and it's really not similar at all. So I feel like going into it, my expectations were already really off. They were not accurate, and so the book just seemed really off for me. And the whole thing about this whole book is just like the romance, right? Like she, this princess, goes off, save her beloved, the love of her life. But the thing is, the way how the book starts off, you barely see any interactions between the two of them. So for the entire book, she goes off, saves him, and you're just like, wow, like she really loves him. You don't actually see that love really. So I just never felt like I was invested with the romance at all. I was just very like, okay, like I see that you love him, but I also don't really, like I'm not invested with the romance because I've never actually seen the romance like between the two of them. They barely had any interactions that made me feel like I was invested in it or like I cared about the romance. And so for this book, where it heavily relied on this romance, this whole adventure to save her loved one, I was like, couldn't really get into it because I just, you know, couldn't connect with the romance and the characters at all. And the characters, like Emerende herself, I felt like she was just very stupid and naive. Like she's very young, I get that, and you know, she's trying to prove herself as a queen, but because I don't know, I just feel like yes, she's young, but she's also trying to prove to everyone like in her kingdom that she's worthy of being queen and not having to, you know, marry into the kingdom and she can rule in her own right. I was like, some of the choices that you make are just very innocent and very naive and kind of stupid, that I just felt like she herself was like not the best character. And yeah, I just didn't really like her at all. Okay, then the next book. So I have a few books on here that are kind of like older reads that came out a while ago, but I read them this past year, so I'm including them. And the next one on here is All Fall Down by Ali Carter. This one I gave 1 star. So this basically follows a girl called Grace who from a long time ago has believed that someone actually murdered her mother. And despite what everyone else thinks, she will stop at nothing to find out who murdered her mother. And the issue with this book was that I also didn't like the character at all. I just found her super annoying, and to be honest, I was so over her from the very beginning of the book. So one thing I do want to mention is that there is mental health representation in this book, and I can't really say for myself if it's good rep or not, but I've also read other Own Voices reviews on this, and the general consensus I've seen so far and I've read so far has been that it's not good. So I mean, just to definitely be mindful of that if you know your Own Voices and you're trying to read this book. But so far, what I've read so far about from Own Voices reviewers, that the representation for mental health in this book was not done well. And lastly, another reason why I didn't like this book was just the ending was so predictable. I was really hoping for some big plot twists, but it was just it happened exactly the way how I imagined it to happen or how I predicted it to happen, and so it just like made the whole book very disappointing for me. Okay, then the next book is one that I feel like I had such high expectations as well, and it was just such a disappointing read, and that is Children of Virtue Inventions by Tomi Adeyemi. This one I gave 1 star. So this is the sequel to Children of Blood and Bone, where Zelia and Amari ends up basically bringing back magic to the land, and this is the aftermath and like the consequences of what happens afterward. I did not like this book at all. To put it bluntly, it was a hot mess of a book. Like literally everything that I loved about the first book just fell apart in this one. Like the characters were so good, like I was so rooting for all the characters, the female interactions, like strong female characters. This book, I don't know what the fuck happened, but everything just like tear down, and I just found myself despising and disliking everyone. And the ending itself was also super disappointing as well, and I just don't think I will ever pick up the series again. Like the first book was so good, so well crafted, super strong female characters. This one had a lot of like girl on girl hate. The plot was just messy. I didn't like anything about this book. I can see why this whole book had like such a huge delay in the publication date, because it was just not good. Like it was like, I don't think I'll ever pick up the series ever again. It was just not good, guys. Okay, then this next book is one that had a lot of praise, but personally I was like meh, and that was No Exit by Taylor Adams. This one I gave 1 star. So this book follows a girl called Darby who ends up in a snowstorm, and she ends up stranded at a rest stop with 4 strangers, basically just waiting for the storm to pass. Because of circumstances at home, she's desperately trying to reach her family, and she's outside trying to call them, trying to reach them, and she somehow ends up spying a young girl trapped in a cage in a car. And so what happens next is a series of events of her trying to find out who kidnapped this girl, what's going on, and trying to save this girl and escaping. I think because this book was just so hyped up for me, my expectations of it was just so high, and so the reality of it just didn't live up to it at all. The biggest disappointment, I think, was the fact that the culprit was actually revealed super early on, and it was someone that was so obvious. Like, even when Darby was describing the characters, you were like, huh, that person seems very suspicious based on your description, and voila, it was that person. So I was just like, I don't know, it just seemed like, okay, you know, like, I mean, yes, there was some plot twists here and there, but I felt like it just already left the book, or already started off the book in a very not so great place. I also felt like the book had a lot of conveniences where she would just miraculously survive despite what happened, but then she would also make these like stupid mistakes to land her in these situations in the first place that I'm like, I don't know, just seemed suspicious overall. So overall, I just didn't really think it was a very good book. I thought it had a lot of potential. It seemed very fascinating, but a lot of the executions of it was just not done very well. Okay, then this next book is The Forbidden Wish by Jessica Corey. This one I gave 1 star. So this is kind of a gender bender retelling of Aladdin, where the genie is actually a female and her name is Zahar, or Zara. She's been trapped in a lamp for hundreds of years, where now magic is forbidden and genies are actually illegal. And one day somehow Aladdin ends up finding her lamp, and she must now disguise herself while he figures out what his 3 wishes are. And on the other hand, she ends up finding herself striking a bargain with the king of genies to basically save a prince, a genie prince, in exchange for her freedom. But the catch is that she will have to betray Aladdin, except the thing is she is falling in love with him. So I feel like this book had a lot of potential. I love retellings. I really like the Arabian-esque world, but I felt like this book had a lot of potential and it just really fell flat for me. The thing about this book for me was that the characters were very bland. I didn't really care much for them. Not only that, but the magic system of the genies were very, very confusing for me, and the world building just seemed kind of like meh to me. Not only that, but the romance itself was very, very unrealistic to me. I didn't feel at all invested with the characters or the romance, like anything about it. I was just like, you know, I just didn't care. I think, to be honest, I think this book would have been a lot better if the romance wasn't there as a distraction, because I felt like it honestly was, and that the whole book had been way better if they were just really, really good friends, you know? But unfortunately the romance just kind of made things weird, and it just kind of like brought the book down. Anyways, moving on to the next book, and that is Wilder Girls by Rory Powers. This one I gave 1.5 stars. So it has been over a year since the tox has infected the students and the teachers, and now the entire school is under quarantine. The tox is basically something that has turned their bodies into these strange, weird shapes and creatures, and because of a dangerous force outside, no one ventures outside of the school fence. And one day this girl called Bayat goes missing, and Hetty, who's her like her best friend, would stop at nothing to find out what happened to her, including venturing outside and facing the horrors in the forest. I felt like this book was just, the pacing of this book was just very inconsistent, and the overall flow wasn't great. I think this book had a lot of potential, but I think the execution was very subpar. My biggest issue is actually the characters and their character development, because there was none. I felt like there was just these characters and I just didn't feel invested with them, and they didn't even grow at all. Like, you know, I like when characters, you know, change throughout the book, and I felt like nothing really happened. They just remained stagnant. And this is another book where the ending was also very, very kind of like open-ended. It just felt very unsatisfying, and I read this entire book to reach that ending, and I was like, not here for that, guys. So yeah, I feel like for me personally, I think endings are super important. Like, I read this entire book, I want the ending to be satisfying, and when they're open-ended or they're kind of just vague, I'm like, this is not satisfying to me at all. And I basically spent all this time reading a book to come to this conclusion that it was just very meh. So anyways, last and final book on this list is All the Silent Voices by Elena Michelson. This one I gave 1 star. So over 2 decades ago, a girl called Emma was sexually assaulted and forced to leave college because of the incidents. Now 20 years later, she has a successful job, a very loving family, and everything gets rocked when her rapist actually ends up buying the company that she is working for. Now she's trying to figure out if she wants to seek justice or just keep her own life safe. My issue with this book was the writing was just so rudimentary, as well as the plot. The only reason why I continued reading this book was because I was invested to find out like how far would she go to get what she wanted at the end. And if it wasn't for that one demanding factor in my head, I could have DNF'd this book way long ago. Another thing that I really didn't like about this book was just the characters. The husband in particular was just kind of a douche, I think, but somehow Emma just kept seeing him through these like rose-colored glasses and like made him to be so loving and everything, and I was like, that is not necessarily the case to me. I felt like he was just such a dick, to be honest. So yeah, I just felt like the book itself was like, like I said already, I only cared about how far she was willing to go. Other than that though, I thought everything was just not really well done. So anyways, that's all the books that I want to mention in this video. Some of them were really big books, some of them were just, you know, indie books, but overall these are all the books I read that I really did not like in 2020. Super disappointing, wish I didn't read them, and I'm hoping that, you know, next year I will be able to cut this list down, since, you know, like I'm trying to prioritize this year is just to really read good books, and if I DNF it early on and just, you know, like don't even continue with it, then I wouldn't have these books on this list in the first place. So yeah, I'm really hoping to maybe not even have this video next year, who knows, like that's the plan. I really just want to do like best books because I just want to love all the books that I'm reading. Unfortunately though, that is never the case, so I have this video, but fingers crossed guys that hopefully 2021 will bring better reading for me. So let me know down below, which books have you read that were just super disappointing, which books did you absolutely hate, were there any books on this list that I hated but maybe you loved? Let me know down below as well. But as always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe down below, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.